Business Insight today, we take a look at Nigeria's long-term multi-sectoral aspirations. Also, we take a look at Nigeria's healthcare sector 63 years on. I am Vivian Oguche, and you're welcome aboard Business News Today. But let's begin the day's top stories. Let's begin with the day's top stories with Alfreda Ambi Bassi.
Thank you, Vivian. Hello and welcome. Business updates and the current market trends comes up after this break. Welcome back. Nigerian banks have reported substantial gains from foreign exchange FX revaluation, totaling 1.7 trillion naira in the first half of 2023. This marks a significant increase compared to the 66.559 billion naira combined gain they reported in the first half of 2022. The banks include Access Holdings, FBNH, FCMB, Fidelity, GTCO, Stanbic IBTC, Sterling Bank, UBA, Unity Bank, Wema Bank, and Zenith Bank. EcoBank, due to its Pan-African status, is not included in these assessments, and Union Bank has not yet released its first half results. The surge in FX revaluation gains have been attributed to the devaluation of the naira, which reached 769 naira 25 kobo per dollar in June 2023, compared to its closing rate of 461 naira 50 kobo per dollar in 2022. This FX revaluation gains have significantly boosted the profitability of these banks. The CBN has directed banks to set aside FX revaluation gains rather than using them for dividends or operational expenses, a measure aimed at safeguarding the financial stability of the banks. And moving on, the former president of the All Nigerian American Congress, ANAC, Amina Temitope Ajayi, through her firm, Silicon Valley Nigerian Economic Development Incorporated, has secured an impressive $19.4 billion in pledged investments for Nigeria during the United Nations General Assembly in New York. Three major investors, Souq Global Holdings, Global Expansion Exitel, and Allen Lay and Partners International Vietnam, have committed $5 billion, $3.2 billion, and $11.2 billion respectively to various sectors of Nigeria's economy, including tourism, aviation, technology, telecommunications, agriculture, entertainment, sports, and energy industries. This partnership is expected to boost Nigeria's economy and create job opportunities, aligning with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals for economic growth and infrastructure development. And away from that, Germany has signed a historic deal worth $3.5 billion with Israel to acquire the Arrow 3 hypersonic missile system. This missile system will play a crucial role in Europe's defense against air attacks. The signing ceremony took place in Berlin and was described as a historic day by German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius and his Israeli counterpart Yoav Gallant. The deal marks the largest agreement for Israel's military industry. The Arrow 3 system will enhance Germany's air defense capabilities, a move driven by the need to bolster NATO's defenses in Europe following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The system is designed to intercept missiles beyond Earth's atmosphere and can provide protective cover for neighboring European Union states. Israel and the United States jointly developed and produced the Arrow 3 system, and its sale had to be approved by Washington. This mobile system can be deployed as needed to address various threats. Coming up next is the stock, commodities, and currency market trends after this break. Thank you for staying with us. At the conclusion of the day's trading session of the Nigerian Stock Exchange, a total of 273,798,040 shares were exchanged in 6,826 deals. Compared to the preceding NGX trading day, the data for yesterday indicates a 25% decrease in volume, a 25% decrease in turnover, and a 3% decrease in the number of deals. The current market capitalization of the Nigerian Stock Exchange stands at 36,400 billion naira. In total, 117 equities listed on the NGX participated in today's trading session. Out of these, 16 experienced gains in their share prices, while 26 witnessed declines. RT Briscoe led the gainers with a share price appreciation of 9.76%, closing at 45 kobo per share. It was followed closely by Computer Warehouse Group, Better Glass Company, and Veritas Capital Assurance. On the flip side, Vitafilm Nigeria was at the bottom of the list of losers, with its share price declining by 9.92% to close at 22 naira and 25 kobo per share. It was trailed by FTN Cocoa Processors, Owando, and John Holt. Access Holdings recorded the highest trading volume, 45.9 million shares changing hands. Zenith Bank followed closely alongside Unity Bank and United Bank for Africa. And at the close of Wednesday's trading session on the Uganda Security Exchange, USE, a total of 94,600 shares were traded with a corresponding market value of 21,005,600 Ugandan shillings. Compared to the previous USE trading day, this represents a significant 72% decrease in trading volume. However, there was a notable 50% increase in turnover. As of now, the total market capitalization of the Uganda Securities Exchange stands at 16,100 billion Ugandan shillings. In the day's trading, 3 equities listed on the USE were actively involved, resulting in 3 gainers and 6 losers. Centum Investments led the gainers with a 1.42% increase in share price, closing at 235.62 Ugandan shillings per share. Following closely were Umeme, which saw a 0.24 rise, and MTN Uganda with a modest 0.04% gain. On the flip side, Jubilee Holdings experienced the most significant decline with a 2.43% drop, closing at 4,722.54 Ugandan shillings per share. KCB Group followed with a 1.23% decrease, followed by East African Breweries and Equity Bank. The stock with the highest trading volume was MTN Uganda, with 41,800 shares changing hands. Umeme came in second, followed by Kipla QC. The current price of wheat is 579.50 US cents per unit. In the commodity market, gold is trading at 1,864.69 US dollar per unit, while silver is priced at 22.54 US dollar per unit. Copper is valued at 3.70 US dollar per unit, and Brent crude is also currently at 95.60 US dollar per barrel. Brent crude oil has surged to $97.2 per barrel, hitting its highest level since November 2022 due to rising demand and reduced crude oil supplies. Saudi Arabia and Russia contributed to this surge by announcing production costs lasting through 2023, subject to monthly reviews. In early September, the benchmark crossed $90 per barrel for the first time in 10 months due to voluntary cuts by Riyadh and Moscow. Goldman Sachs recently raised its 12-month forecast for Brent crude to $100 per barrel, citing stronger inventory draws, with expectations of Brent prices remaining between $80 and $105 per barrel in 2024. In the parallel market, the USD buying at 1,000 naira and selling for 1,008 naira. The British pound exchanges between 1,260 to 1,270 naira, while the euro is purchased at 1,050 naira and sold for 1,060 naira. It's a wrap on the business news this morning. I am Alfreda Ambebasi. Vivian Oguche is waiting to walk you through the next phase of Business Insights. Stay with us.
You're welcome back. So we begin this segment with a report on Nigeria's long-term multi-sectoral aspirations. This report is put together by Business Insights' Alfreda Ambi Bassi. Take a listen.
Nigeria's long-term aspiration encompasses development in sectors such as oil and gas, agriculture, entertainment, media, telecommunications, and manufacturing. Economically, the country aims for sustained growth, economic diversification, reduced unemployment, and poverty alleviation, all contributing to an improved standard of living and economic stability. Infrastructural development, including roads, transportation, and energy, is a key focus to enhance productivity and citizens' quality of life.
For development of the youth, sometimes we get lights, sometimes we no light, and some people who are walking around have no jobs. So all those things like that, Nigeria has to get a look of it.
I want to make government do light, fuel, and food. That's the important thing for Nigeria now.
Addressing security challenges, strengthening democratic institutions, improving healthcare and education, and engaging in international cooperation are also vital objectives for Nigeria's holistic progress.
Expectation is that Nigeria should repair road, electricity, food supply, and so many more things.
A dream of a Nigeria that everything here would be fair. I talk about justice, I talk about corruption, I talk about police brutality, I talk about, you just name it, you know.
Nigeria's journey from 1960 to 2023 has seen both challenges and progress. The future path involves diversifying the economy, combating corruption, prioritizing infrastructure, education, and healthcare, and involving youth empowerment. And experts say collaborative efforts will be crucial in shaping Nigeria's journey towards sustainable development and prosperity. Alfreda Ambi Bassi for Souq News.
So for more perspective and in-depth analysis on these issues we've raised, as well as Nigeria's healthcare sector, I'm being joined by Dr. Chinonso Umeano. Did I get it right? I tried.
As right as can be.
Thank you so much. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm very well, and how are you?
I'm doing all right, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. I've also got with us virtually Dr. Oladoyin Odubanjo. He is the Executive Secretary of the Nigerian Academy of Science, and he's also the past chairman of the Lagos chapter of the Association of Public Health Physicians of Nigeria. Dr. Doyin, are you with us yet?
Good morning.
Good morning. It's
Yes,
so good to see you again. So I'm going to be doing this between Dr. Nonso and yourself. If you just listen to the report by Alfreda, she raised some germane issues bedeviling the nation as well as aspirations. So I'm just going to be asking you both as Nigerians and professionals based in Nigeria if these aspirations have been met. So the question will be, how far so far? We'll talk about that briefly before we delve proper into the health sector. So Dr. Chinonso, like I said, how far so far as regards Nigeria's multi-sectoral aspirations as we mark our 63rd birthday in a few days' time?
I believe there's so much more that we can do as a nation, as a people. I believe Nigeria is young, though. And
we are young at 63.
At 63. you might say that's just my opinion, though, but
yes.
I believe as a nation, as a people, we're young. Democracy is young, so to speak, and there's so much more that we can aspire towards, you know. And of course, there's so much more that can be done, but we need to do it together as a people. And that's my own 2 cents.
Fantastic. We need to do it together, and which brings me to the theme of this year's anniversary celebrations. Is actually around unity and togetherness, making Nigeria work together as one.
Yes.
Fantastic. Let me take this to you, Dr. Doyin. Regarding the report Alfreta put together and regarding what Dr. Chinonso just said, he said we are young at 63. Democracy at 63 is still young. Would you say that as regards Nigeria's aspirations, the goals are being met?
Well, I would say that the fact that we're looking at an indefinite strike, nationwide strike next week, says a lot to answer that question, to say that aspirations are not being met. Another thing in the news, which for me speaks volumes, I believe yesterday in Abuja at the Ministry of Works, where the minister locked the people out of the ministry for being late. And then the people went away and locked the minister in and decided they were going to deal with him. And some of the comments was that they were late because times are hard. And so for many of them, perhaps where they would have taken transport, now they had to walk. So they were upset that they were being punished for harsh economic or socioeconomic realities that we're going through. So I think that the aspirations are far from being met, clearly by what is going on in the society around us. And then by the Japa syndrome, as we know it, I think that also pointedly tells us that things are not well, because home is where the heart is. So when people are willing to abandon home and leave, it means that home is no longer suitable or comfortable and it's no longer meeting their aspirations. With respect to age, I will agree in a sense with Dr. Nonso that we're young. When I think of nations like England, which is how many donkey years old we would say, Nigeria is many nations combined into one, and many of those nations are quite old. But as an entity put together as Nigeria, it's relatively young. However, that said, when you again compare with countries like Singapore, then we say we are too old for the excuses we give, because we have all of the resources they do not have. We're about the same age as a nation democratically, and we are way behind. So in that regard, we are too old. Thank you.
Well put. Let me come back to you, Dr. Chinonso. He talked about the Japa syndrome. And the health sector is the hardest hit when you talk about Nigerians leaving the country in droves to other parts of the nation. So we have smoothly delved into the health sector proper now. How does that make you feel, people leaving the country, especially healthcare professionals?
It makes me feel sad and afraid for the future of the country because, in, how would you put it now? In conversations that we have, private conversations, you would hear me say something like, we'll get to a point where we begin to import doctors to work for us. But that's not going to happen. But the way we are going, the way we are treating our health sector workers and the speed at which they are leaving, of which they are needed abroad, they are needed in all these countries that they are going to.
But they also needed home.
They also needed home, but home is not providing the suitable, enabling environment for them to do their best work. And they find that all these other countries are providing this environment that they need. So it's natural. Human beings are going to go where they are appreciated, where they are able to function and do their best work. And that's what is happening. It's simply our inability to provide for our own doctors in Nigeria, who were trained in Nigeria, by the way. We always forget that they are all trained in Nigeria. They grew up in Nigeria, only they grow up and find out that the work environment is not enabling enough for them to achieve their best, and so they have to leave.
What's an ideal work environment for you?
So an ideal work environment, you have the hospital able to pay you, to be able to sustain your own life, right? And we must remember that the doctors and nurses work in shifts. So the work is not very easy because the hospital has to run 24/7. So you have a work environment where the doctor and nurses stay in there most of their time, and they're not compensated enough for that, for that work. Plus the work it tends to be dangerous both for the patient and for the doctor, and that's why we have something called a hazard fee or a hazard pay. So, and all those things. And then you have a situation where sometimes, like the doctor said, the doctors are going on strike because their pays are not coming as at when due. And so these kind of things, by the time you look at it and you, my mates in abroad are getting 10 times more than what I'm getting here, so why don't I just leave? So it makes me afraid, it makes me sad, you know, but it is the reality, and we can't, you can't hold somebody back from trying to express himself and live his best life just because he's a doctor or he's a health worker. And so we can't blame them, but it's the reality that
but
we
are
face.
optimistic that things will change, right?
We've been optimistic
I mean,
for a very
that pause
long time.
alone answers my question. Well, let me take this back to you, Dr. Donyi. You are the one that brought up this Japa syndrome, because initially I was going to ask you to walk us through Nigeria's, you know, the heyday of the health sector in Nigeria till date. We'll probably do that. Then you take us to this issue of health workers en masse leaving the country, you know. But before that, could you walk us through the heyday of Nigeria's health sector from independence till then?
Well, I won't say that I'm an expert on the history. However, we can say certain things have worked well, in quote. Life expectancy has increased over time. We came from where, if we all can recall, and I'm sure most of us know it, whether we are 63 or not, I'm sure we know of the days when people were having, you know, 10, 12 children, simply because many of them were not expected to survive. You know, so as things improved, people had also fewer children because now they were more certain that the health system was able to cater for those children. There was a vaccination program that was improving. There were healthcare centers around, primary healthcare centers that could deal with simple conditions. And therefore, children didn't have to die, you know, early. Mothers could have babies in facilities where there were healthcare professionals. So you don't have neonatal deaths as often. Infants, which is children under 1, also can survive better. Then you go to children survive past their 5th birthday. So we had all of those improvements, you know. Again, we started to you know, train. You had more medical colleges, for instance. So, for instance, we started with Ibadan. But if you look at Nigeria now, we have many medical schools. So we're training more and more people, like Dr. Nonso said. Many of the people who were talking about Japan were trained here in Nigeria. So we built more training centers, meaning that the capacity, because you needed also qualified people, you know, to be able to teach. The first Nigerian head of department in Department of Medicine in Ibadan, you know, just died. Was that early this year? At close to 100, you know. So, but that was the first Nigerian, you know. So, but now we've come to the place where there's no white person in any medical college who is provost or whatever. We have the capacity. So we built capacity over time. Those are good things. We talk about our health expenditure, which also has been going up. Those all sound like positives. But then as we went through that, in fact, again, we had a very smart primary healthcare system. So we were following, to some extent, up to a certain point. We were building a proper health system based on a proper health system pyramid design, which is that the biggest part of your health system will be your primary healthcare system, which is the system that reaches everybody in their localities. You know, so your vaccination programs, your maternal programs, your you know, your programs for treating children and all of that, you know, and your health post in all the villages and things like that in your local government areas. So we had a good system. In fact, if you take it even further to environmental health, for instance, we had all the, I mean, from in the Southwest, for instance, many people will remember the Wole Woles, which are basically the health inspectors. You know, they will go around, look in the houses, be sure your environment was clean, be sure you had a toilet. I mean, that was a health system that was functioning. And we were building that kind of system until, I guess, things fall apart.
Wow. That's quite a journey. You know, so let's address what Dr. Nonso talked about, an ideal working environment and the reason why doctors and healthcare professionals are living in droves to other parts of the world. Would you want to address that you know?
Yeah, I think it's quite aptly described it, which is, you know, it's not just a function. In fact, if you think in terms of capacity, like I alluded to earlier, definitely our doctors have the capacity. If you look at it also, you know, like I said, also home is where the art is, meaning that most people, there's nowhere like home. So most people would want to be at home. So what has happened to us is that we have aggravated what the researchers have called the push factors, which is we have made home uncomfortable for the healthcare professional, such that we are pushing them out of the country. Not that they really just want to go, but we have made things very difficult and uncomfortable, that they almost look like they are crazy if they stayed. You know, I always tell people, and I like his silence when you asked if things would get better. That was a question people asked me, and some people said confidently, you know, at the start of COVID, and said, no, now we are sure things will be better and all of that. And sadly, I said to them, no, things won't be better, things will get worse. You know, and they said, no, why would you say that? Even the private sector now is interested. I said, watch and mark my words. I hope I'm wrong, but I doubt I would be. Things will get worse right after COVID. Once all the travel bans are removed, people will leave in droves. And I've been proved right. And why could I predict that? Because right under COVID, we were not even paying doctors' salaries regularly. So I'm saying to myself, who does that? You have an emergency that has taken the whole world by storm. The whole world is shaking and on its knees. And the healthcare professionals are being looked for everywhere in the world. And in Nigeria, we were not even paying them regularly. In Nigeria, we bragged about increasing the hazard allowance, which Dr. also mentioned. And hazard allowance simply just means we know you can die at this job. It's like being in the army. We know you can die. We know this job is going to expose you to threats every single day of your life. And some days, sometime you might be unlucky and you just might die. If you don't die, you might be incapacitated. You might get infected with something that may even stop you from working again for the rest of your life. That's basically what hazard allowance is talking about. And in the midst of that crisis, we were bragging about increasing it from 5,000 naira to about 20,000 naira. And we wanted the doctors to prostrate and be very grateful. So I thought something is wrong with our psyche. You know, so if we have this bad remuneration system, and we also have a system where people go to work and they really don't have the tools to work, the infrastructure is not there. They basically sit there and they watch a lot of their patients suffer and die unnecessarily for things that they are capable of treating. Then they will really get dissatisfied. I know somebody who left medical practice and told me her reason for leaving years ago, her reason for leaving, she said, was that she was tired of going to work every day and watching people die unnecessarily. It was leading her into depression. So she told herself, I can't do this anymore. I can't go to that place anymore. You know, just to watch this every day, come back home and be moody and be sad. She said, no, I need to be elsewhere. So she quit the sector. So that is what is happening with our Japa syndrome. And we need to get serious about it and not just talk about it.
Okay, so before I come back to Dr. Chinon, so since you make predictions and they come to pass, you said things were going to go bad after the COVID-19, crisis, and it happened. How about we take a look at this new administration that has come and promises to hit the ground running? Do you think after a series of well-intended dialogue, the tide might change?
The question, I'm sorry, the question in my head as you asked that, has that well-intended dialogue happened or is still going to happen? Then the question also that follows that is that when you have a well-intended dialogue, while I can't pay my rent and I can't pay school fees and I can't fuel my car and I can't buy the food that I need, for how long would I stay alive and survive myself while waiting for a well-intended dialogue to manifest into something realistic, something I can really touch and feel? So again, there has been, in quotes, supposedly well-intended dialogues with the NLC. But where has that gotten us in the last how many months? So I think we need to get serious with governance in the country, and stop playing games. Every time now we are reading stories about people seeking medical care. And I think the last popular one was the one in Plateau State, and they were harvesting the woman's kidneys unknowingly. And then it turns out the man is not even a doctor, and blah, blah, blah. Increasingly, people ask by medical opinion, and one of the first questions when they describe their issue and experience to you, one of the questions you almost always now have to ask them is, are you sure it was a doctor you saw? How do you know that was a real doctor? How do you know that was a qualified nurse? We were told Mohbad was injected by a nurse. Now we are told the person was not a nurse, not a qualified nurse anyway. So all of that is increasing. So we're all at risk. Our relatives are at risk, and all of that. And if we keep paying lip service to these things, that's what's going to happen to us. Somebody is going to be harvesting our kidneys, killing, people and relatives and all of that next door to us, and we will have no clue because he's wearing a white coat.
Okay.
We'll have no clue that that's a quack.
Dr. Odoyin, you keep opening cans of worms. It's like opening a Pandora's box. You just mentioned Mohbad's death. We are going to dissect that in a jiffy, and we're going to talk about quackery in the health sector. But let me bring this to Dr. Chinonso, who's actually laughing in the studio right now. Dr. Chinonso, so Dr. Odoyin just said something that well-intended dialogue is not what will put food on the table. I want you to react to that. Also, I want you to tell me if there are other ways, things can be achieved without people going on strike.
Without doctors going on strike?
Without doctors going on strike.
Well, the only real way things can change is if we get serious, like Dr. Odoyin has mentioned. Really, we've had several policy documents in healthcare over the years, but the implementation of those documents is, and you understand, the problem is, like we say, leadership. Is that real leadership that is hands-on, that really wants things to change? You understand? I think I was browsing the other day and I saw the 4-point agenda by the new Minister of Health. And, it sounds good, but it sounds good on paper. You understand? And like Dr. Odoyin has mentioned, when are we going to have that dialogue? What is that dialogue going to lead to? And what is going to change after that? So we've seen several of all these things come up and we haven't seen any real change. You understand? So in the end, we need real leadership. We need people to actually take responsibility. And we, just like we do in the health sector, if you're not functioning well, you have KPIs and all that. If you're not functioning well, it will be obvious that you're not functioning well. So, but we don't have that at the levels of leadership in healthcare where we have at the federal, the state, and the local governments. So we need real leadership, we need people to take responsibility, and we need to see that things are moving. And healthcare is such that if that begins to happen, it will show up in the health of people, it will show up in the attitude of health workers to their work, it will show up in the health of our, and news like this, like harvesting kidneys, will just disappear. So the actual truth is that we need real leadership. We need people to take responsibility, and we need to go past all these dialogues and start seeing things work.
Walk the talk, right? Wow. Let me come back to you, Dr. Odoyin. Now, for our viewer, he talked about Mohbad. Mohbad is an artist who just passed, and there's been a whole lot of furor nationwide over his death. And Mohbad was signed to Malian Music. It's a record label owned by Naira Marley, who is a very popular musician in Nigeria. That said, let's talk about quackery in the health sector, Dr. Odoyin. How can this be addressed?
Well, it's by ensuring, first and foremost, that you actually have the genuine. So this thing about the Japa syndrome has to be curtailed. You must treat your health workers well and retain them. That's the truth of the matter. That's the simplest things. Of course, people want to talk about enforcement and all of that. But, I'm taking it from the approach of, if you have the genuine, then the fake becomes more obvious, and it's easy for people to know don't go to that place. This is where you go to. That guy, they may not know or be able to say that, oh, it's not a doctor, but they can at least tell you it's not a good doctor like that one. It's not a good nurse like that one, you know. So we are creating space for the quackery by allowing the good ones to be frustrated and to leave. That's what I mean. You know, if you look in the bank, you want to train your bank staff on recognizing counterfeit. What do? You expose them to the original notes. You know, they touch them, they feel them, they smell it, they sleep with it day and night. They get used to the original. So the moment you bring, 1 million cash and the guy is counting, once he touches the fake one, he goes, something is wrong. He may not know immediately what it is, but he stops. He says, something is wrong with this note. This note doesn't feel right, and that's exactly what needs to happen. You need to have enough of the real around you, and then the fake has no space. And then you can talk about, the enforcement sides of things afterwards. But in fact, that enforcement is almost like security. You will need a lot of feedback from people in the neighborhood for you to be able to fish out some of these quacks. I've been a doctor in a village before, that for miles and miles around me, you can't find any real hospital, whether private or government owned. And except for the hospital that I was running for the government. And if you look at that kind of situation, if in some deep village there somewhere, somebody is treating people and doing all sorts of things, you are not likely to know, except the people are the ones who give you feedback. They send a report and say, something is happening here. This man is killing people. This man does this. That's when you get information. So we need to ensure that we have the enforcement will also depend on the people knowing and being exposed to the real. If that's the only option they have, then also, whether they like it or not, they will accept that as the norm, and they are not going to give you a feedback. They won't report anything because that's the only option. The best they can do is not to go there, if at all they know not to go there. But when they are desperate, they will still end up there. Okay, so I think this thing of addressing JAPA addresses all of those things, like including quackery.
Let me bring this back to Dr. Chinonso, because I want you to also, lend your voice to this issue of quackery. But before that, let's do a little bit of backgrounding to Mohbad's story, whose name is Irioluwa Aloba. Yes, and he's probably known as Mohbad. So the National Association of Nigeria Nurses and Midwives, a Lagos State Council, recently denied reports that one of his members was arrested for injecting late singer Mohbad. The reason why I brought this up is to also give a background to what Dr. Doyin had said earlier on. So a suspect was arrested for injecting Mohbad. That led to his death as part of the preliminary reports. But the NANMF has said that it wasn't one of their members, which brings us to this issue of quackery, which Dr. Doyin has actually addressed extensively. But what do you think, though?
I think that Dr. Doyin is right. Just to add to what he's saying, okay. Just to add to what Doctor has said, is, in the healthcare workforce includes doctors, nurses, and other health workers. And nurses are actually very important in this chain. Very, very important, because they are the ones who touch the patients the most. And so you need that nurse to be top quality and to know her job and to understand the rudiments of the job, because the doctor prescribes a medicine and the nurse calculates the dose and gives the patient. And like I always tell my patients, medicines are chemicals as well. That means they have side effects. So if you give too much, then you could overload the patient. And this is somebody who is not feeling well. So the person's body is not functioning at optimal. So just to bring it back to quackery, we have a lot of all these nurses going on around, right? And we'll call them nurse, we'll call them doctor, but we don't know what their standing is. So just to bring it back, the UK actually, let me just put a straw and takes out all our nurses, right? I've worked with a lot of them who are now in the UK. And it just goes back to say that, look, we are creating this space which must be filled. People need healthcare. The number of patients is not going to reduce, but the number of nurses is reducing drastically. So what will happen is that it will get filled with people who are not trained properly or who don't know the rudiments of all of this. And so like we always say, or like it has been proposed, the quality of your healthcare depends on the quality of your nurses. If the quality of nurses goes down, then the quality of healthcare goes down. That's just it's a simple 1 to 2. So the fact remains that quackery will always be there as long as we have created this vacuum and we don't have the quality that is required to handle the patients.
All right, let me take this back to Dr. Doyin now. As we begin to wrap up the show, let's look at recommendations, right? Because here we try to make it solutions-based analysis and all of that. So in May this year, the federal government described as unworkable a bill that was being considered by the National Assembly seeking to restrict the migration of Nigerian doctors to climes perceived to be greener pastures. Now, while I was reading this, Dr. Nonso was laughing, so I'm going to come back and ask him to tell us why he's laughing. In the meantime, I understand that Dr. Doyin has gone due to technicalities, but I do hope you get to join us again, Dr. Doyin. In the meantime, Dr. Nonso, do you want to react to this? I mean, the National Assembly felt, not this current one, their predecessor wanted to stop the Japa syndrome by putting the hammer down, but the federal government said no, right? What's your reaction to that?
I think the federal government is right. You can't really force people to stay where they don't want to stay. Like Dr. Doyin has said, home is where the heart is. Home is where all these doctors want to work, but if home is not creating that enabling environment for them, then you can't force them to stay. And I don't know how, even if the bill was passed, I don't know how.
No, it wasn't. The federal government
I know, but
yes.
even if it was passed, I don't know how they're going to actually restrict, how they're going to enforce it and say you must stay.
Yeah.
I don't know how that was going to happen, but it's not something that is the solution. We need to address the root cause. The root cause is that doctors are not getting paid well. Doctors don't have this enabling environment for them to do their jobs. And so this, you know, the greener pasture is what it is the greener pasture. So leave and go to the greener pasture. And we get it a lot. We that are doctors, we get it a lot from our own loved ones. Leave this country. As we get it from our own loved ones, you know, and when you when you get it long enough, it begins to seem like Dr. Doyin has said that the ones that are staying are the ones who don't have,
like they are crazy,
who are crazy, you know. So the root cause needs to be addressed. That's just the fact. Putting the hammer down is not going to solve anything.
Let me take Dr. Doyin. You're welcome back. So I talked about a bill that the National Assembly, the previous one before this one, was working on, that the federal government rejected to forcibly restrain doctors from leaving the country. I want you to give us your take on that, and then we'll slightly talk about donor apathy in Nigeria. Your take, doctor.
Okay, I think it's just reflective of the quality of lawmaking we're getting, or let's call it the quality of representation that the Nigerian people are getting at the center. You know, to make such a law, you know, well, let's just say it is absurd. And I think particularly I watched a program where the lawmaker was particularly interviewed. And one of the clear things, because he was questioned pointedly by a colleague, and one of the clear things there was that he never really interrogated the problem before making a law. And that's ridiculous. You know, that's like trying to solve something without understanding what the problem is. You know, so if you want to solve a problem, you first go and find out why is that problem. I think Dr. Nonso just pointed out and mentioned root causes. So that's the key. You must know what are the root causes. You know, what's causing this, what's causing that. And then you have to talk to the stakeholders. Of course, primary among which are the people themselves, you know, the health professionals themselves who are living, doctors, nurses, this, that, the pharmacists. You have to talk to them, you know, and then ask them what is the real problem. Also ask them how they think the problem can be solved. But to sit like a headmaster and say, we'll pass a law, you cannot go, I think is ridiculous. One of the things that people don't also understand about this problem is that people don't just migrate by leaving the country in the health sector or maybe in any sector. They actually also can be inside the country, but they've left that sector. So you can have your health professionals who are there, but they no longer function in that field. I know, some who are in banking. I know some who are pilots, So the people can actually leave the sector. They can be in country if you like to go and lock all the borders and say every medically qualified person, or doctor, nurse, blah, blah. Once we see them at the airport, give their names and details to the DSS and immigration. Once they see them, they detain them and say, you can't go. It's fine, but what you'll find out is that many of them will end up opening shops and things, and they may not be in that sector anymore. So it's a case of forcing the camel to the river, but you can't force it to drink. So we have to look properly and make better laws than that. Thank you. I think there was a second question I didn't answer there, so if you mind repeating that one.
Yeah, I'm going to put that to you. I was going to talk about donor apathy, but I want to do a little bit of backgrounding here. Earlier on, you talked about a thriving primary health care sector. Now, the primary health care sector is meant to provide services to the majority of people based on need without geographical, social, or financial barriers. So I did a report on malnutrition this year in one of the northern states, and it was difficult for mothers with malnourished children to get to a primary health care center. They had to go miles before they could get to one. Also, the food they had to feed the malnourished child was basically from donors. But one of the complaints we received from the medical practitioners was that there was donor apathy in Nigeria. The donors are beginning to pull out. How can this be addressed? How can the primary healthcare sector begin to thrive again in Nigeria? And how can you address this case of donor apathy?
Okay, so let me say that I was supposed to have been pulling up a can of worms. You are bringing out a hydra-headed monster, that the singular problem, for instance, used as an example, is a great example, which is malnutrition. And it shows you how that healthcare problems are not only solved by dealing with health issues. It's multi-sectoral. You have to deal with a number of sectors. So if we use that example, and you're talking of donors being tired, so that's donor apathy. They don't no longer donate the food that the mothers feed them. The big question to ask is, why do we need such donations? Looking at Nigeria as it is, why can't we feed ourselves? Why are we having such malnutrition and asking donors to give us what to feed the children? No, we shouldn't be in that state. But also, mind you, if we had that problem before, it's becoming worse. Why? Because we also have insecurity. So we hear about it, maybe those of us sitting in the Southwest, in Lagos and things. Also, we have apathy about some of those issues because, oh yeah, the Northeast is insecure. Oh yeah, the North is insecure. Oh yes, blah, blah, blah. But what we're forgetting also is that it's increasing a problem. Okay. And once you get that, people are no longer going to the farms because they're afraid that something will happen, something bad will happen to them, that they get kidnapped, killed, and whatnot. And then they have bigger problems of feeding. Then the malnutrition increases, and malnutrition is something we consider very dangerous in public health. It underlies your health. If you are not well nourished, then you are going to be sick, even with the sickness or diseases that ordinarily your body should fight off. And that increases the disease burden for the country to manage. And then you have insecurity means that you cannot even, the primary health care center you're talking about, you can't get anybody to go there. So no doctor will go, no nurse will go, no technician will go. You can't get anybody to go. They will rather resign than go there because they know that that might as well signify the end of their lives. So it's multifaceted, it's hydra-headed, and we must, look at it that way and realize that we need to solve many of these other problems alongside, the health problem. From time immemorial, for instance, we've known that most of your health professionals are in the southern part of Nigeria. So 90% of your doctors, perhaps, work in the southern part. The governors can tell you that in many of the states, they can count the number of doctors they have, easily, and it's horrible. Why? You can't get the guy in the south to go to the north. He will, even his family will beg him, that look, just leave the job. Now we can't even get them to go do NYS in the north, isn't it? People don't want to go. So we must solve our problems in general and realize that all of these things we're looking at are going to impact on us all, ultimately. That's my view on that. Thank you.
So Dr. Doyin just said you can't even get some people to go to the north to do their NYSC now. So that brings us to what he said, that this issue we are looking at now is multi-sectorial. We are wrapping this up now. So I want you to give your recommendations as to how you think government can make things work in Nigeria's healthcare sector.
For Nigeria, just like Dr. Doyin has said, it's multi-sectorial. So it's not just the health sector that we're looking at. So we're looking at our laws, we're looking at our leadership, right? And we're looking at the need for people who actually want to do the job, who actually have the people in their hearts and these sectors in their heart and want to see things work. For example, Dr. Doyin has said that, when one of the lawmakers who was pushing the legislation was questioned, you find out that he didn't even do the research that was necessary. So we need people who understand what needs to be done and are dedicated to doing it. And I think that's generally what we need from this moment on, and in every sector, not just in healthcare, because all these things are intertwined. The resources that are required in healthcare are produced in other sectors. So for us as a country, looking at where we are right now and trying to move forward, we need to start refocusing on the things that are important: leadership, policies, and dedication really to the matters that affect Nigerians.
Fantastic. Let me come back to you, Dr. Doyin, as we wrap this up. Dr. Chinonso just gave us what it looks like to have an ideal Nigeria. I don't know if that's ever going to happen. I'm optimistic. I'm an incurable optimist. I know it will happen someday. We've talked about the Japa syndrome and how most healthcare workers are running abroad. But it's not as if it's totally green over there, right? We've had reports of how Nigerian workers or Nigerian healthcare professionals who've gone there are overworked. So it doesn't take too much to keep professionals back home in Nigeria, right? So if you're going to reel out some of the basic things to put in place to pacify healthcare professionals, what are those things going to be?
It's again, if we're going to start listing one by one, we probably won't get through that, okay? But it's about those broad categories we've talked about, which is personal remuneration, okay? And the work environment as a whole. So what do we do to fix that? What remuneration will be sufficient? What kind of work environment, tools and things would people desire to have? That as a minimum, for them to be happy working here and going to their work every day, serving the people. Now, that you can only get by consulting widely and consulting the people themselves, consulting the healthcare professionals. And honestly, I want to underscore, as my final say, what Dr. Chinonso has been saying. I don't want it to be lost on us, which is leadership. Everything is possible if you have the committed leadership. And I'll give you two quick examples. 2014, we had the Ebola outbreak. In 93 days, Nigeria stopped that outbreak. Whether you know it or not, the world expected calamity in Nigeria. They expected this was going to be it. It had ravaged 3 countries in West Africa: Liberia, Guinea, Sierra Leone. It had entered the most populous city in West Africa, which is Lagos, and everybody was expecting that whatever you've seen in Liberia or wherever, you're going to see times 10 of that in Lagos and in Nigeria as it spreads. And it didn't happen. 93 days it was stopped. Why? Leadership. Everybody was committed because all our leaders, political leaders and all, knew that this was a serious problem. And even if they ever caught Ebola, cannot be treated outside of Nigeria. So they were asking, what do you need? Is it money? Whatever amount of money was needed was being released pronto. Anything that was needed, they were giving it. Take it, take it, take it, solve the problem. And indeed, the health workers showed that they knew what to do, and they did solve the problem. Again, 2020, COVID outbreak. Relatively, Nigeria did well. Why again? The world was shut down. There's no escaping, whether you're a politician or not. There's no escaping. If Nigeria doesn't work, you die there. So everybody was committed to making sure things worked. They did their very best with the teams available, and we did relatively well. So leadership, if we sit down with the people, the professionals and all that to say, now we're serious, we want to fix this, it can be done and it will be done.
Thank you so much, Dr. Doyin. Well, Dr. Doyin is the executive secretary of the Nigerian Academy of Science and a past chairman of the Lagos chapter of the Association of Public Health Physicians in the country. Thank you so much for being a part of the show today, and a happy 63rd birthday anniversary in advance to you.
The same to you. I hope we get a piece of cake from Souq News.
I hope so. Thank you so much, Dr. Doyin. And Dr. Chinonso, it's so good to have you on the show. I do hope when we call on you again, you will come. We've been having Dr. Doyin over and over again, but I hope when we call on you again, you'll come.
I'll be available.
Thank you so much. Dr. Chinonso Omiano is a public health practitioner, precisely a healthcare management professional. Thank you so much for being a part of the show today. My name is Vivian Oguche, and if you had a good time, why don't you join me again on Monday, same time, same station. But before then, let me wish you a happy Independence Anniversary on the 1st of October. Let's be optimistic. I know Nigeria will work. Have yourself a good day, and bye for now.